Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom!
It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, Adult Conversation podcast listeners. Today, I've got a doozy of a show for you. Me and my guest, Jennifer, talk about the big D. Jennifer is a no-bullshitter, straight shooter who has been through a divorce herself, has a popular podcast all about it, and has written books on the subject. She's here today to unpack divorce and marriage, to help save us from any unnecessary pain and suffering, and also to help those who might need some clarity, whether they know it or not. She tells us all about her truly unique story, her regrets, her hot take on who should come first once you have kids, her choice that backfired, and what doing divorce right really means. I honestly feel like this episode could save some marriages out there because of the real deal things Jennifer urges us to contemplate when considering divorce. Also, I think some of you won't agree with all of it. I know there were parts I had a hard time hearing, and you'll hear me vocalize it and we talk through it. And ultimately, there's just so much truth here, including a question that might change everything in your marriage. Jen also lays out what us married moms don't understand about divorce and gives us tips on how to basically not find ourselves in a divorce. As usual, there are lots of laughs, some singing, a Hamilton reference, swearing, of course, and oversharing on my part. I need to give a huge shout out to my newest Patreon peeps, Tiffany Perconti and Jennifer McNeil. Thank you guys so much for the support. If you want to join these two heroes and many more in supporting me and this podcast, go to www.patreon.com/adultconversation. That's patreon.com/adultconversation. It's way cheaper than you think. And a quick update on my Adult Combo and Chill event in Las Vegas at the end of June. Thank you guys for such a great response. As of right now, there are only a couple spots left. So if you want to meet me in Las Vegas for a momcation, meet and greet, and book signing, and swag bag, head over to my website, adultconversation.com/events, to get more info and sign up ASAP so you don't miss out. It's kind of going to be like the podcast in person, and you'll get to be there. On to the show. I'm so thrilled to talk to you today because this is a topic that so many of my listeners are struggling with. And I've even had people say, will you please do a podcast on divorce?
Oh, good.
So
well, not good, but.
Yeah, but yes. Yeah. So I am thrilled to have found you. So today on the podcast, we have with us Jennifer Hurwitz, and you're from the Doing Divorce Right podcast. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that's like that title is we need to unpack that because I didn't realize that there was a right way and a wrong way. And I want to hear all about what this doing divorce right thing is. And so
let's do it.
Something else about you is also you have a book that's called One Happy Divorce, Hold the Bullshit, which already means you're going to fit in great here. And then you also have a divorce coach's guide to staying married. That's called Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda. Is that right?
You got it. I have 2 books. Yep. It's one for each customer. I have one happy divorce for people who are going through divorce. And then I have Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda, Divorce Coach's Guide to Staying Married, is kind of helping those who are kind of on the fence, not really sure what they're doing. I'll explain both. We'll go through both.
Okay, awesome. You have just like so many credits, and including something about Oprah, like you were featured in an Oprah magazine, right?
Yeah, twice, and some more to come. So it's crazy. My life has been nuts since this divorce. I tell people my divorce gave me a whole new career. I took lemons and made a lot of freaking lemonade. So it's cool.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Okay. So I want to hear all about this story. And I also want to hear, I have about 1 billion questions, and I have questioned my friends who have gone through this about what would you want to know from this lady? So I have some specific things too, but what do the listeners need to know about you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, this is something very strange about me that nobody really knows. So before I was all the stuff that I'm doing now, a mom and all the good stuff, I was a DJ.
Oh my God.
For 15 years, I taught dance. I was a DJ, like I did bar and bat mitzvahs and corporate parties, and for 15 years. And so it's really the polar opposite, well, kind of what I do now, which is public speaking and My friends are like, how did you go from dancing and DJing to, talking about divorce and all this good stuff?
So this is amazing news. What is your favorite song to play when you're DJing? And what is your least favorite song?
Well, my favorite song always depends on like what's cool and new during, I haven't DJed in a really long time because I got pregnant and had kids. And so like nobody wanted a pregnant DJing. The DJ was nursing in the bathrooms, which I did. Like I was pumping my boobs in the bathrooms at parties. But so whatever is cool on the radio is like what I usually play. But my least favorite of all time of every like wedding bar mitzvah was like, of course, like I hated Love Shack. I hated YMCA. I hated those like, oh my God. I was like, please don't play that again. So I never wanted to play them unless like the party host or the guest wanted me to play them. And then I was like, oh, for God's sakes. But,
Okay, what's your take on the chicken dance?
Oh my God, I hate it. But the little baby, the little kids love it. And it's fine.
I know.
The Macarena, the chicken dance, I hate it. I hate it all.
We had at our wedding, what would I call it? Like a birth plan, but a DJ plan with our DJ that said no Jimmy Buffett.
The worst.
I think there was no chicken dance, sadly. And one of the older dads the next day after our wedding that morning, we saw him at breakfast and he goes, I had this terrible dream last night that I went to a wedding and all they played was rap music.
Oh, that's my kind of wedding. That's my kind of wedding right there. My kids would be thrilled.
I know. I was like, then we've done something right if the older adults are unhappy with our musical choice.
Perfect.
Okay, so like you said, this divorce gave you a new career. So will you give us sort of an overview of what your story was?
Of course I can. Okay, so this is kind of how shit went down. Excuse my language. So I was married for 13 years, and I kind of felt like I had to get married. I think like a lot of young women between their 20 and 27-ish, 28, you feel pressure. I felt pressure. I was a Jewish girl, I'm still Jewish, growing up in, the north and whatever in the suburbs, and everyone's getting married. They're dropping like flies. And I was always a bridesmaid, never a bride. And, I got all this pressure, get married, have kids, get married. And I found this guy and he was perfect. He was perfect on paper. He was perfect in everything. And he was, the guy. He was I called him the perfect sperm, kind of like the perfect storm, or the perfect sperm. And he was just perfect. And I'm like, you know what? Can't let this one go. Wasn't really ready to get married. Looking back, woulda, coulda, shoulda. I wasn't really ready to get married, but I knew that I wanted kids more than anything in the entire world. And I think a lot of women, girls feel that way, They may not be ready to get married, but their clock is ticking and they don't know they can actually save their eggs. And I tell my clients now, girls, just save your eggs. So I did. We dated for 6 months, got engaged, 10 months later, got married, 6 months later, had a kid. Boom, boom, boom. And you know what? I tell my younger clients now, wait, enjoy, travel, have fun, do your thing.
Yes.
I didn't.
Right. Like get to know this person, like build that foundation because that baby is going to just try to crack that shit right open.
And it does. It changes everything. And I'm sure you've had people on your podcast that talk about this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I call it a trip around the sun. I have a good friend and a colleague. Her name is Dr. Roberta Shaler. And she tells everybody it's a trip around the sun. Date for 4 seasons. Be with that person, learn them, know them, take off those rose-colored glasses and get to know them. Because when you have that kid, before like all that shit hits the fan, it's different.
Yeah.
So, we got married and I had this baby who was, the best thing that ever happened to me. And the minute that kid came out of my vagina, I was like, he comes out and I look at my husband at the time and I'm like, you're second and he's first.
Yeah.
And I said it. I was like, you know what? I don't need you anymore. I got your sperm. I got the kid and I'm done. And I really honestly felt that way. And my world just transformed.
And you didn't feel that way beforehand. Like when you were making the baby with him, you were still like, no, I'm on board. This is what I want. Or did you always know he was a means to an end for you?
You know what? I think this is so
like
funny.
Deep down, maybe.
Oh, no, I knew. I knew he was like, I looked at him. I remember saying to him, I kind of just want your sperm. Is that okay? And I thought I was kidding, but I really wasn't.
Wow.
I really authentically, if I'm being truthful here, I really knew I just loved everything about him to be a dad. And he was going to be the best. And he was. He was the best father on the planet Earth. He was a shitty husband and a great dad. And I was a shitty wife, but a freaking fantastic mother. I was the best mom ever, but I was the shittiest wife. And if you can own that, like that's my second book, Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda, Divorce Coach's Guide to Staying Married. I talk about how in a marriage, you need to put your kids second. In a divorce, you need to put your kids first. You need to own that. You need to put your kids second because your relationship should be first. I'm getting really deep here, but when you're married, you need to really foster and love and nourish your relationship so that your kids can see what a good foundation they have. You know what I mean? Like love each other up, mush each other up so that your kids can see what it's supposed to look like, right? Because if you love each other and all that oxytocin is pumping and you got that cuddle hormone going on, you're happier. Right.
Right. But everything is so skewed now with this intensive mothering thing
right.
where we have to do all these things to be a good mother that there's no way you can also be a good wife on that.
Right.
Unless you stop doing mothering stuff. And so I think a lot of women aren't willing to drop that stuff for their husbands, or they hate their husbands, and so they don't want to.
Well, I hated my husband. I hated my husband because you know what happened? Guess what happens when you stop having intimacy and sex? You resent that guy, and he resents you, and it all falls to shit. And guess what? You lose each other. You've got to work. It's work. It's a choice. It's a choice to love each other. It's a choice to put that partner first. Because if you don't, you're not going to make it.
So do you think, had you taken your own advice back then, do you think you would have stayed married even though you knew he was like sperm donor in a sense?
Yes, because here's what happens. And here's the thing. People say to me all the time, why don't you just get back together? Because my ex and I forgot to tell you, are best friends. My ex-husband and I are best friends right now, 5 years out of my marriage.
Wow.
No, I don't want to get back together with him. I have a great relationship. I'm in a 2-year relationship with my boyfriend. I love him to death. But here's the thing. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Or had I known then what I know right now, I never would have pulled the plug. I wish I could take every married woman and sit them down and say, listen to me, please, and read my book. And look, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, Brenda, I'm not saying to stay in a abusive, emotionally abusive or physically abusive relationship. Please get out. Everybody listen carefully. Please get out.
But I think what you're saying is what one of my friends said. She goes, and she's with somebody new now, and she says, if I had known I was just trading an old set of problems for a new set of problems, I might have stuck with the first set.
I love her. Absolutely.
You would love her. She would love you.
It's the devil you know, for God's sakes. Look stay with that guy. Stay with your husband because it's fixable. It's workable. It's doable.
If it's fixable and workable and doable.
Yes, Brenda. Yes, of course. And if it's not, get out. By God, for God's sakes, don't stay in a marriage that's not healthy. But look if he's not, by all means, if he's not abusive, he's not beating you, he's not hurting the kids, he's not a drug addict. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But if you're just not having sex and you look at me, you come into my office and you sit down and you go, I don't love him anymore. My heart doesn't pitter patter. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to look at you. I'm going to say, go home and, can I swear?
Yes.
Go home and fuck your husband. Go home and love each other up because you're going to end up divorced if you don't do the work.
Yeah, that's what everybody talks about. Oh, when we're younger and we get married and all the older people are like, well, marriage is work. And we're like, no, it's not work. It's fun. And then as you get to be in this age, and you'll have moments where you're like, oh, this is the work they're talking about. I am seeing this.
Right.
So was there a moment so how did everything go down? Did you just grow apart or was there something that happened? Like, how did you know you guys should be divorced? And was he on the same page as you?
Well, you ready? We stopped having sex.
Okay, yeah.
We stopped having sex. My kids came first and I just cared more about them. And he was second. And in his boat, the work was first. Kids were second. I was third. And he would tell you that flat out. But here's what happens with men. Of course, work is first. Because why is work first, Brandy?
Because of capitalism and the patriarchy.
Right. But
probably not the answer you're looking for, but yes.
Close. But work is first because they have to put, or men or women, whoever's the breadwinner. Let's say it's the opposite of not being sexist, but let's say the women at work comes first because they have to feed the family. They have to put money on the table. They have to bring home, right? So of course work comes first. Why are you yelling at your husband because he's working all the time? Stop that. Stop beating him up because he's working all the time. He's providing for your family. Stop beating up your wife because she's working from 9 to 5 or coming home and exhausted. She's exhausted because she's working to support you. So of course work comes first. And you're at home with the kids or vice versa or whoever, right? It's exhausting. I was exhausted. Mark came home. That's my ex-husband. Mark, my husband, I call him.
I have a friend who says that too. I love it.
Mark came home at the end of the day and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. Take the kids away. You know what? But look, he had a hard day at work too.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing is that equality about it, where they're out providing for our family financially, and then we're at home, if we're a stay-at-home mom, providing for our family emotionally and physically there. And so you've got this is what I always say, is you get two exhausted people that have to spread themselves in all these different roles. It's like, is it even really possible to do that without something taking a back seat?
Right. You're right.
Yeah. How do two people, like the amount of energy in this modern era that we put into parenting, like I don't know that two people can actually do that and also have jobs and have meaningful relationships with each other. Like something has to give.
I agree. And you know what? Something always does give. But here's the thing about it. What I really believe, it's a choice on what takes the back seat. It's a choice.
Exactly.
So you just have to choose what's going to take the back seat. Is it going to be X? Is it going to be Y? Because in my opinion, being in love is not a feeling. It's a choice. So everyone says, oh, I'm not in love anymore. Well, guess what? You get up in the morning, you choose your underwear. You choose what color you're going to wear. You choose the cup you're going to pick out of the dishwasher. You choose. It's a choice. Wake up and choose to be in love with your husband. Everyone's like, oh my God, she's crazy. No, I'm really not. It is work, but so is a divorce.
And if you were to say this, and maybe you talk to husbands as well,
Yes.
would you say the exact same things to the husbands and say, wake up every morning, choose your wife? Is there a difference between what you tell husbands and what you tell wives?
The only difference I say is most of my husbands that I talk to will say, all she does is nag. All she does, the number one thing I hear from men is all she does is nag. And you know what? Do you nag? Like, are you a nagger? Like, and I say to the guys, well, why is she nagging? Why is your wife quote unquote nagging? You know
Thank
what?
you.
But guess what? Why is she nagging? Because guess what? If you would just do the shit she told you to do, she wouldn't nag. Right?
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Yes.
But here's the thing I say to the women, stop nagging, because here's why: it's going to end your marriage. Because nothing should be that important. Don't give the power to that thing, that towel, that dish in the sink, that shit he doesn't pick up off the floor. Leave it. Walk away from it. Let it be his issue. But it's so hard for us. It's a control thing, right?
Right. It totally is. And you're right about how there is this both-sided thing. On my podcast, we talk a lot about the gender inequality in partnerships and in parenting. And so we're talking about a lot of times moms are asking these dads to step up and help more with things. And because of so many systemic reasons, dads are like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I don't have to. But there is a fine line between, okay, so if you have an issue, if you have a real deep issue that your husband is not helping you with, and you go sit him down and say, I really need this from you. Mm-hmm. And you ask for that thing and you demand that thing, that's different than micromanaging where he's putting his clothes every 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
That's a different thing. And I think it can be sometimes hard because I think it's so complicated. You can have a need, something that you want from them, something that you'd like their help with or their support with. And if they say no to you, then it can be that anytime you ask for it again, you're nagging, but actually it's because they haven't done the thing. But then there's that line where, no, it is just nagging. And how do you tell that sometimes? It's really hard to tell if you've gotten into the space of, okay, this is nagging or not.
I agree with you. And you know what else too? That is such a good point. I think that sometimes it becomes a lack of respect. Mm-hmm. So how do you know if it's a lack of respect? Yeah. And here's the thing. If they leave the dishes in the sink over and over and over, is there something underneath that? They're just not doing it or is it because they clearly do not respect the fact that you've asked them 15 times to put the dishes in the dishwasher?
Exactly. That respect thing, I think you're spot on. That is at the core of it, right? Because you can feel it if you ask for something and somebody just blows you off and they know it's meaningful to you. But if it's something as stupid as a dish,
don't give it power. Don't give it that power. But here's, you know what I did once? This is the truth. Once my ex-husband, my husband, he would leave his shit all over the house. So one time, this only took one time, I collected everything he left around the house and I put it on his pillow. Dirty dishes, his socks, his whatever, and I put it on his pillow. So when he got into bed that night, it was stacked up, all the shit. And he looked at me and he said, oh my God, what the fuck? And I said, I don't know, what the fuck? And he said, are you kidding? And I said, I don't know, are you? And he said, well, what is this shit doing? I'm in the bed. And I said, I don't know, what is that shit doing in the bed? And he said, I love you.
Troll level 100.
Right. And he said, you are Jennifer. Oh my God, this is like so beyond crazy. And I'm like, I don't know, is it? And I kept just going back and forth. And he said, Jennifer, I don't understand how this is. I said, I don't understand how I can tell you for the last 6 months that I just need you to pick your things up off the floor. But now they're in the bed. So you have two choices. And I treated him like a kid. I mean, how degrading me, right? I said, you can either put your things where they go or you can sleep in another place because it looks like all your shit's in the bed, Mark. right? I mean, like,
so what happened? What did he do?
just,
What did he do? What did he choose?
He chose to, that night, he chose to sleep in the other room, but it never happened again.
Wow.
Never happened again. So it's just to a point where, like, how far are you willing to go to make your point? Now, of course, I'm divorced.
But wow, wait real fast. I was gonna say, that's what I was gonna say.
Right, I mean,
I was gonna say, but wait a minute, like, is the lesson here that we do take them to task, or is the lesson that if you do that, you will be divorced?
Yeah, exactly. You know what? It's a fine line. I don't know, you guys. Let me know how it works for you. I mean, the thing is, it's just the point where how far do you push someone before they just crack? Right? Before this, what's the breaking point?
And that's both ways, right?
Right. Yes.
That's such a good point, is both ways. Maybe that's a great like conversation starter for a couple who's having a hard time, is how far are we going to push each other until we crack? Do we need to do that, or could we work on things before we crack?
It's a lot of ego. A lot of ego is involved. And I think that especially for me, I had to see this after I was divorced. So that's why, like, if you can't own your mistakes, if you can't say, you know what? I was wrong. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry is not, this is what people always say to me too, like, you're allowed to fight. You can fight all you want. Fighting is actually okay. It's how you fight, how you resolve conflict.
Yes.
Saying I'm sorry is okay. Saying I'm sorry, but that's not an apology.
Or I'm sorry you feel this way, the classic.
Right. Or, you know, I'm sorry, but no. Just I'm sorry. That's it.
So I'm so curious about what was the day? Like, did it lead up? Had you guys talked about divorce in your fights? Did you talk about
all the time?
Divorce?
And you know what I did too? I did a lot of really, I threatened. It was always, well, I'm going to, you know what? This is just, I've had enough. Or one day we're going to get divorced, or you know what? You should just leave. And that is non-productive all over the place. You should never make the other person feel like their marriage isn't safe. Threatening divorce that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, like it's being dangled in front of you.
Right. And we both did that. Like, well, just leave, Jen, if you don't like it. Finally, I think we didn't have sex. Oh my God, I can't even tell you how long it was. And here's the other thing too about sexless marriages. People don't realize we would sit around with our friends and we weren't fighting all the time either. We were just angry and resentful because we hadn't had sex in so long, right? So people would say to me, oh, we haven't had sex in 6 weeks. We're fine. Everything's great. Or we haven't had sex in 6 months. Oh my God, it's fine. We're busy. It's not fine. You'd be surprised the definition of a sexless marriage. Do you know that sexless marriage is Googled, that term is Googled over 10,000 times a month?
Wow.
It is the most Googled phrase out of any other phrase in like love, marriage, relationships. Sexless marriage is a marriage that you have sex less than 10 times in a year.
See, okay, I'm having a hard time with this part because I struggle with this idea, especially for moms who are newly postpartum or who have toddlers in the house.
Right, that's different.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, does this shift? Is there like a certain time frame where you're like, yeah, when you have any kids that are under 3 years old or 2 years old or 6 months old, whatever it is, you know, the rules change a little bit because we all know just how exhausting that stage can be.
Yes.
And to also have the idea that, well, I heard that sexless marriage is if we have it less than this many times a year. And so I should be having sex. It's like at the end of the day, you finally lay down after caretaking people all day. And then you're like,
you're exhausted.
One more person waiting for the handout.
Right.
And you feel guilt because you don't want to be in a sexless marriage. So where's the limit on that for you in terms of like how old people's kids are that's acceptable?
I don't think that you need to put parameters and I don't think you need to put a definition per se. What I really believe is it's not always about the sex. It's more about the intimacy.
Yes, correct.
Let's say that again. Let's say let's not beat ourselves up. Let's not say that we have to have sex 10 times a year. Let's not say we have to have sex 6 times a month. Let's just say to ourselves and each other, what works for you in your relationship? And you know, as long as you're having open and real conversations with each other and you're not on separate sides of the bed, if you get in bed at night and you're both exhausted and you look at each other and you say, honey, I am so exhausted, but goddamn, I love you. And I wish that we could have sex tonight, but I can't do it. That's the difference. There's a difference there between that and getting in the bed and rolling over on your side and being, oh my God, I just can't fuck you tonight.
Yes. I used to tell my postpartum mom clients this same thing. And the dads is if you are feeling guilt that you're not having sex, have a conversation with him about that guilt so that he knows it's on your mind. And so it's not necessarily you have to cave in and do the thing.
No.
But at least he knows you're thinking of this. This is on your mind and he might have some compassion for it. So I think you're so spot on about the communication piece and the intimacy, because intimacy can exist in so many non-penetrative forms.
Absolutely. Like I know that my boyfriend and I even when we are in bed and we're exhausted, every night he's holding my hand. He reaches across the bed, he'll rub my back, and we just hold hands when we go to sleep. Even if we're not cuddling. Like sometimes I don't want anybody on me. Like I just,
yes.
like we just hold hands. I mean, even if it's laying on the couch together and touching, I don't care what it is. It's just the lack of intimacy is when your marriage starts to break. It's just so important because any kind of touching, the oxytocin starts to be released, which is the cuddle hormone, I like to call it. So just keep that going. And I don't think you need to beat yourself up, especially if you have young kids in the house. I mean, for God's sakes, I remember like my son, Jonah, has Asperger's. Well, we say he fell off the spectrum, so not anymore. But I was raising a special needs kid.
Oh.
So there was no way on God's green earth I was having sex. I was exhausted. I mean, I just couldn't do it. You know what?
Yeah. So when it all went down, was your divorce, were you guys angry at each other? You say that you're best friends now, but was it nasty? What was it like?
Well, I'm going to be just 100% authentic with you. I said to Mark when we got divorced, we will not be nasty. If you can't do this divorce the right way or correctly or be amicable, you won't get it. And I laugh, but that's what I said. People, they're like, you're kidding. I'm like, no. I was like, look, we'll do this the rest of our lives and we'll be married and we'll make this work. But at the time we were both so angry and so resentful. Did I pull the plug too soon? Probably. Do I think looking back, if I would have stayed, we would have probably maybe, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't have,
right. You can't
I can't know. But, it was not a choice for me. We put our egos aside and we put our kids first.
Was there one thing that happened or did it just build up and one night you were like, you know what, I'm actually going to just go?
Actually, the straw that broke the camel's back was we hadn't had sex in a really long time. And then we finally did. And I looked at him and I was like,
what's a really long time? Will you give us an idea?
Yeah, it was like, I want to say almost, God, it must have been 6 months, maybe longer, 9, maybe 9. And we had sex and I looked at him like, oh my God, that was like the worst thing. He's like, that was the worst thing. And I was like, that was basically like having sex with my sister. And he's like, I think I'd rather have sex with your sister. I mean, it was.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, it was bad.
So you hadn't had it in 6 to 9 months and then you decide to have it and then you both thought it was awful.
It was so, you know what it's like? This is how I explain it. People think I'm nuts. Okay. You know, like when you're driving in a parking lot and someone steals your parking place and you're like, holy shit, that guy just took my parking place. And then you walk into the restaurant or the bar and that guy sits down next to you that stole your parking place. And then he's like, can I buy you a drink? And you're like, no, you cannot fucking buy me a drink. You just stole my parking place.
Yes.
That's the exact feeling. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Right, because it's like, it doesn't matter if he's perfect in all these ways and there could be a future with him. Like things have already been ruined. It's already been burned.
Yes.
It's like one of my family members who's been divorced says you can't unscramble an egg.
Exactly. You can't unring a bell.
Like once that's done,
right.
But I mean, which it sounds like maybe sometimes you can try, but.
Yes. I think if we could have, that's so crazy because I think if looking at him now, like we are such good friends that my kids even say to me, would you guys stop being so close? It's annoying. You're supposed to be divorced. People think they can't believe it. Like my friends are like, how is this possible that you guys are so close? Why don't you just get back together? Because we're not in love. And I don't have regrets and I don't feel guilty and I'm not sorry that I'm divorced, but I want to help other people learn from my mistakes because I know exactly what I did wrong.
Okay, what do you think was the exact thing you did wrong? Just not prioritizing him and him not prioritizing you?
I mean, I didn't do anything for me. I didn't do anything for him. We'd go out on Saturday nights. I thought I was the best mom ever. I thought I was the best wife. We'd go out every Saturday night. But guess what we talk about? The kids. Yeah.
See, this is all in line with so much that we talk about here, which is this complete, as a mother and as a father too, when your personality and your conversation completely revolve around your kids. It's not healthy and it affects so many other things in your life. And you are just like illustrating that for us in a really different way that I didn't even expect.
Well, I'm
really.
glad, I think.
No, thank you for that. So one of the things from the outside listening to your story that I think is, wow, your husband wasn't a sociopath narcissist, like so many ex-husbands of people that I know. And so one of my friends had this question. So what happens when you divorce a narcissist or someone who is a total unworkable jackhole? Like it sounds like your husband was at least a decent human being, like on good faith.
He's a great guy. I just fixed him up last week. I swear to God. Yeah. You know what? Here's the thing about my podcast too. And when I do my show is that I always have to remember that very few people are in my position.
Right. Yes.
Most people have horrific divorces with asshole narcissists that you wish you never had to speak to again.
So what do you tell them? How do the rules change for them? Because I mean, I would imagine it's like what my friend was saying. My friend said to me today, she said, one of the hardest things is that unless your ex is physically abusive, there's no protection for you. If he keeps abusing you mentally and emotionally, your friends get sick of hearing it. Your new partner does. So you just accept it. So she said on the surface, it looks like we co-parent well, but below the surface is this awful abusive secret that, and nobody can protect her from it.
Well, I have people. That's something that I've made really my mission. On my show, I have brought on some of the best people to help with that kind of thing. There are so many amazing therapists and people that work with narcissists. And here's the thing too, I'm real careful not to throw out the word narcissist.
I bet, yeah.
Because it's really, unless you're diagnosed, it's very easy to say someone's a narcissist when they're really not. And the diagnosis itself is very specific. So you have to be kind of careful. But narcissistic men or women, both, I deal with them all the time. And they're sick people.
So then because my friend said, because I said, I'm doing this podcast today. Is there anything you'd want to know? And she says, I guess what I really needed to know were concrete things that could protect me emotionally, physically, and financially.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a name. Dr. Virginia Gilbert. She deals with high conflict divorces. And she wrote a book called Transcending High Conflict Divorces, I think is the name of the book. I'm going to get it for you.
And do both people have to be involved for that to work?
No.
Because, right? Okay.
And also there's a great app. Let me give you this too. It's called coparenter.com. One of the most amazing apps that you can actually co-parent and never speak to your ex.
And is it recorded?
Yes.
So that if somebody wanted to send you threatening text messages?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is the most amazing thing you'll ever see in your life.
Wow. So you could say to your ex, the only way we're going to co-parent is on this app because I do not trust the way that you are treating me. Oh,
and you know what else
God.
it does? It also, if you're texting and he starts to text in a negative fashion or something that app will stop it. It'll say, like, let's say you start to get nasty. The app will say, are you sure you want to send that?
Oh my God. Like that old in the Windows, like in the Word, that little paper clip that bounces up. It's like, sorry, you're being a dick. Maybe don't say that.
Yep. And you know what else it does too? There's judges, there's lawyers, there's everything on the app itself. So everything becomes documented. You can actually contact a judge immediately.
But these abusive exes will actually say yes to signing up to it. I could see them doing a power move like, I'm not signing up for that.
Well, guess what? If he doesn't, you go to your attorney and you get a court order that says he has to. Because here's the thing. No one should be in a position where you have to be put through that constantly every single day. And here's, it's just enough. And here's another thing too, a really big tip that I learned for your girlfriend and all your listeners too. Short and sweet is best. Short and sweet is best. When you're dealing with an asshole, or a narcissist or someone who just wants to light you up because it makes him feel good, say less is more. Send a text that has nothing but the facts. So you want to take, Jamie has to go to the doctor tomorrow and whatever, blah, blah, blah. Jamie has a doctor's appointment at 4. That's it. Not, hi, how are you? Got to see you, blah, blah, blah. No. Nothing nice, nothing nuanced, nothing. Just the facts and move it around.
Yeah, like a telegram. Like you're paying for every letter.
Every letter counts. And when he wants to write back and he wants to bullshit you, don't even respond. And that's really hard sometimes because you know what? A narcissist wants to egg you on.
Yeah. And my friend was even saying, she goes, the twisted thing about being with somebody like that is you can't even see it because they've manipulated you to believe these things about yourself. So it takes a while to untangle that.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine.
So then because your situation is so different, so tell us about how to do divorce right. How do people do this?
We take a big breath because, there's nothing worse than having to talk to someone that you can't even be in the same room with. So first of all, there's all these rules that I put in play for co-parenting. And that's really the main thing that when you do divorce right is you have to put your kids first. Here's the thing about it that's so funny. Your whole marriage, you've put your kids first. So what should be different? Why should anything be any different? It wasn't easy. My divorce didn't become really, really good until after. I was separated for a full year. In North Carolina, you have to be separated for a year. And it wasn't easy. It was work. It was really hard work to do my divorce right. We weren't happy all the time. There were things we had to go through. The mediation was tough. We also chose to mediate instead of using an attorney because I feel strongly that, no offense, attorneys, giving attorneys your money doesn't benefit anybody but the attorney. I believe in mediation because then your money stays within your family unit. And really, who gets that money? Your kids.
Yeah.
Please, if you need an attorney, of course, get an attorney.
But if you have two reasonable people who can meet without it, then
right.
Do that.
And it's hard. Mediation is really difficult because you have to really be able to mediate amicably. You have to be able to give up things and give and take. And look, you can't fight over the beanbag. You can't fight over the piece of art that grandma, whoever gave you. Does it really matter? in the scheme of things, no. You've got to remember that every $350 an hour that goes to that attorney could be going to your kid's school.
Right.
Another trick that I like to use a lot is whenever I'm speaking to my husband, if we start to get flustered, I use their names. I use the kids' names.
Okay, so give us an example.
I'll say, if we're talking and it gets a little bit heated or whatever, I'll be like, well, for Jonah, blah, blah, blah. Or Zach really needs, instead of saying the kids, I actually personalize it. Because a lot of times hearing the kids' names when you're talking it checks you. It checks everybody.
Yeah, it recenters you for what's at stake here.
Yes. It kind of checks your brain to say, wow, it's not about me. It's about the kids.
Yeah. Okay. I'm loving all of these tips. Do you have any other, like your go-to top 3? You've given us a couple.
When it comes to co-parenting, obviously we know you never badmouth each other, the parents, your ex in front of the kids.
Right.
I think people forget this, but your kids are part of both of you. So when you badmouth your ex, you're actually badmouthing your child. And you also never talk about things like finances, money or hardships or things that are not, the kids aren't, it's not their problem. They didn't ask for this divorce. They didn't walk into your room one day and say, you know what, Mom, I really think you should leave Dad. He's a real asshole. So that is why every day I wake up and I think they did not ask for this. They were put into this position because we chose it.
Yeah.
I know it's really sad, isn't it?
I know, but it's life.
It's life. It's life.
None of us are getting through this unscathed, including our kids.
You're right.
Like, actually, the other night, I mean, this is kind of unrelated, but the other night, my son and I, who's 12, got into this talk about sex because his forensic science class in 7th grade decided they, like, out the gate, week 3, needed to talk about semen samples for rape.
Oh,
I'm
my.
like, yeah, I was just like, I mean, don't we have fingerprinting, saliva, and blood? Like, why did we just come, just straight there? But so we were talking about, he asked me a million questions. And so we were talking about STDs and he was asking about them and can you die from them? And I've heard whatever and all this stuff. So I was trying to be careful, of course, not to shame an STD because if he ends up picking up one along the way, life is life. So I basically said to him, listen, I'm going to tell you all this stuff. And I know you're super cautious
You're a good mom
about all of this stuff anyway, because he's like, Mom, I'm never doing any of this. But I said to him, but listen, buddy, nobody gets through this unscathed. So if you have an STD in your life, like if it's not an STD, it's something else. And so some people might be like, that's maybe questionable parenting, but it's this idea that none of us get through it unscathed. Like our kids, we cannot make this perfect for them through. And I even told him, I said, because I'm about these like bigger life lessons, which is even though you do everything right and you try to prepare and do it all, and there's like a formula and a way to do it, life is funny and it will laugh at you and you don't know where it's going to get you, but it's going to get you,
That's really funny you say that because I had my boys on my podcast.
Aww.
And, I very rarely edit anything. So I'm like, oh, that'll be great. I'll just ask them questions and they'll answer and they'll say everything right and blah, blah, blah. And we chose to nest after we got separated. I don't know if you're familiar with nesting.
Oh my gosh, that was one of my questions for you.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, we'll talk about it. So, we chose to nest. And so I said to the boys, guys, what did you think the worst part or the best part about the divorce was? Was it the nesting? And Jonah goes, oh, it's the worst part. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. I'm thinking to myself, God, I wish I edited right. Cause I thought the nesting was like the best thing we ever did. So it's funny how kids will just kick you when you're down, because I thought to myself, nesting is the most difficult thing you could possibly do as a parent because you have to be 100% selfless because you're giving up like your space, your everything for your kids. And meanwhile, I thought I was doing such a great thing. And he's like, that sucked. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. That's exactly my friend Kathy, who's been on here before. She goes, and she has 7 grown kids and she's got grandkids. So she knows her shit. And she was like, the funny thing is you're going to fuck them up no matter what. She goes, and the funniest part is it's the thing you didn't think it would be.
Yes.
You were over here trying to do like defense on something else. And meanwhile, the thing you thought was going to help them, they're like, I hate you for that.
Yes. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I'm like, I called my ex-husband. I'm like, oh my God, Mark, we thought we were doing the best thing ever. And they hated it. He's like, no. I'm like, yes. That was so funny.
Okay. So nesting.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and tell us how it went for you and your kids.
So nesting is when the adults, so the parents actually move out of the house and the kids stay in the big house. And so the parents move in and out like every week. So look, you can only nest if you get along. Because if you are in a horrible divorce and it is danger, whatever, it is not for you. So,
or if you don't have the money for it.
Yes, if you don't.
Right?
Well, yes, right. So like, here's the thing too. But Mark and I actually shared an apartment.
Oh my God. Wait, what? I didn't.
Oh my God, you're going to die. You're going to die. So Mark and I shared an apartment, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, thank God. And we shared an apartment, and every Monday we would switch in and out of the house. But here's what nesting does. It very quickly teaches you and shows you what your kids are going to be doing for the rest of their lives. So think about that. Here, everyone's saying, oh, it's no problem. The kids move back and forth. They'll be fine. They're resilient. Guess what?
Yeah. So you got a firsthand look at what all the kids in divorced families do.
I sure did. And I was like, oh my God. I would like leave on Sunday night, right? To go to the apartment, and I'd have to pack my whole bag. And of course I had stuff at the apartment, but I was like, oh shit, I forgot my work outfit. Damn it. You realize really quickly, like, what they're going to have to go through.
Yeah, right. I'm feeling for all the listeners out there who are divorced and whose kids go back and forth, who are just having a moment of like, fuck, I feel for that. Not that there's anything to do different.
You can't. But it's like, you know what? That's another part of the second part of my book, Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda. The first part is what divorce really looks like, because I think that it's really important that married people and family members who don't get it. Until you've gone through a divorce, you really have no idea.
I'm sure. Yeah.
No idea. And so I needed to be really brutally honest, because people just, no offense, don't get it. My married friends had no clue. My parents had no clue they're married. Even therapists and lawyers who are married, they don't understand. And they're looking at it through a different lens. They're looking at it through a married lens.
Yeah. Well, with you guys doing it where you shared this apartment, the people that I've known that have done it have had 2 separate apartments, which is why I'm like, wow, you have to have enough money to do that. And so in a way, I joke with some of these friends, like, I wish I didn't like my husband enough that I could move out and have my own apartment. And my friends and I have talked about, we should just get an apartment and split it. Like we don't have the money for it, but we should do that because it sounds so lovely to have a space that nobody else is allowed in.
I'm going to tell you a story right for this one. So I went to my apartment and the kids were in the big house. We called it the big house. And so like I would go to the apartment and I'd get there, and I swear to God, Mark was dating at the time, this girl, and I swear she was wearing my shoes.
Oh my God.
And
what?
I was like, I would call him and be like, fuck, Mark, I swear to God, your girlfriend, she's wearing my goddamn shoes. And he'd be like, Jennifer, she's not in your closet. I'm like, oh my God, she's wearing it was so funny, but it really wasn't funny. And then I would go back to the house the next week, the big house, and it would be a disaster. Because you have to remember, this is something else that no one gets either. He's never been a single dad, right?
Right. Oh my gosh.
So this house looked like a fraternity house. It was destroyed. There's dog shit and there's popcorn and there's whatever, because he has a full-time job and he's now a full-time dad. So I get back to that house and all I'm doing for the week is cleaning. I mean, I got to tell you, it was a freaking nightmare. We did it as long as we possibly could for the kids.
Okay. So you're no longer currently nesting.
Oh my God, no. It took me, we did it for 8 months. And it was the worst 8 months. I mean, I could not be.
It sounds even worse than being married. It sounds
right.
Because you have the expectations that you would have your own space. And then you're like,
right.
Your girlfriend is wearing my shoes. And like beard hairs in the sink. You're still like, I should get to reap all the benefits of divorce. And this is not that.
Right, exactly.
And so now how does it work? Now you have the kids go back and forth?
Yep. We sold our big house. And so now we each have our own houses.
So then they are doing the back and forth thing that you were like, oh man, this is a lot. Okay. And how do you make peace with that? Or are you just like, that's just how it has to be? Now that you know what it felt like to be that.
Yeah, it's hard. You know what? They're older. They're a little bit older. So Jonah drives now. So, they've been doing it now for 4 years and they've grown up and, it's hard. Trust me, I have such guilt. You just have divorced parent guilt. And of course it's how it is, you know what, but they're okay. They're good. They're doing okay. So.
Well, and it sounds like they probably prefer it to the nesting since they talked about hating the nesting.
Yes,
so
they did. They hated it.
You're good there.
Well, I had no idea until the podcast. I was like, oh my God, you guys. Great.
You're like, I think I need to learn how to edit now.
That's exactly right.
Those are my favorite moments, though, where you expect somebody to say something and then you're like, oh, not what I was expecting, but real moment here,
Oh, it gets even worse because then I said to Zach, well, baby, what was on the podcast? I said, what was the worst part about what was the best part about the divorce? Or I said something like that. And he said, well, there was no best part. You should just never have gotten divorced. I was like, okay. And check, please. I was like, wow, okay.
All right, we seem to be having a bad connection.
Yeah, exactly.
We gotta wrap it
Start
up.
over. Wrap it up. Right.
Well, I always, with some of my friends who are divorced, again, I always fantasize about the like court mandated free time that it out from the outside seems like you get when you have to split custody of the kids.
Right.
So in my mind, I'm like, wow, half of the week you would legitimately get some me time or whatever.
Right.
And so I kind of romanticize that in a really, surfacey way, not actually. But I've talked to my divorced friends, and a lot of them have said that being home alone without your kids is so depressing when you're not the one who chose it. Like in terms of,
Yes.
when you're still married and your kids aren't there, it's like, oh, I got my time. But she said, there is nothing, one of my friends said, there is nothing worse than the feeling of being without your kids when it shouldn't be this way.
Right. When you don't choose it.
When you can't be with them.
Right,
Like it's not that they just aren't there. It's that you can't be with them. And so she said, I couldn't even enjoy my time for such a long time because I just sat there crying. And
that's me. When you don't choose to be alone, it's different than choosing it. When you get to go out with your girlfriends or whatever, you come home to a house filled with people.
Yeah.
I go out with my girlfriends or I go out, on a date and I come home to an empty house.
Right.
Not because I've chosen that, but because it's the way it goes. It's god awful. I want to rip my heart thinking about it,
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the pieces of it that those of us moms who have been in the intensive stay-at-home mom around our kids all the time don't understand about it, is even though that would be a glorious break on one hand, like the cost of it is really, really high.
Absolutely. And those are the things you have to think about too when you're thinking or contemplating, do I want to stay in this marriage? Think hard. Think really, really hard. And that's what I tell my clients that come to me and they're like, I just don't know. I don't have that pitter patter in my heart anymore. It would be so much more fun to date. I'm like, really? Let's talk about dating. I mean, think long and hard because things changed for me that I never, ever even thought about when I was going, like I thought, oh yeah, my life will change. My lifestyle will change. I'll lose my married friends, blah, blah, blah. I never thought my kids would be affected. Their friendships would change. I never thought for 1 minute they'd lose their friends.
Interesting. Like in what situation did they lose friends?
Name it. They're no longer, they're not part of the married, like all of our married friends had kids, right? So now instead of like, they'll do barbecues or they do family parties. And now I just thought, well, Mark and I stayed friends. So they'll just choose one of us. And then they'll have Jonah and Zach too, like usual. Well, now they don't even get to go.
Because they choose none of you?
Right.
Oh,
it's
man.
awful. And you don't think about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things in life where you don't know until you know until you're in it. But this actually leads me to my next question, which is for somebody who's out there who's contemplated divorce, who, isn't sure if it's right for them, like how does one know if divorce is the right option? And what are some steps? I guess maybe this is also related to maybe some of your tips for staying married. Like, do you have sort of a little plan you can walk us through that's like, okay, if you're not happy in your marriage, I would do these first couple of things. And then if X doesn't happen, divorce might be an option for you. Do you have anything to fill in the blanks on that? I know that's super neat and tidy and probably not, but.
Wow. Well, I do have actually, it's funny. In my book, I do have 4 steps or I call them the 4 secrets of a successful relationship or a successful marriage.
Can you give us one of them?
I can. Well, you've gotten a couple already. I just didn't even tell you about them. One of them is speak less, listen more. Basically, it's about talking less and listening more. And I stole it from Hamilton a little bit, but like,
wait a minute.
Talk less.
Hold up. This is now turned into the Hamilton fan podcast. Are you kidding?
I love Hamilton. Don't you love it? God. But
I'm
it says talk less, smile more,
yes.
talk less. Well, that kind of, you know how like women.
Don't let them know what you're against or what you're for. Do I know it? I'm about to sing you the whole song.
Right? I love it.
Okay.
So, that's my thing. Like I thought to myself, you know what? Men are always saying that women nag all the time. But then what do women always say? My guy never listens. He never listens to me. He never listens to me. I feel like if we could just get that. If women could just say to them, guys, zoop, I always say zoop, like zoop in your ears. Listen. Women just want to be heard.
Yes.
We just want to be heard. And you know what? Like everyone always says.
And not gaslit.
Right? Oh God, that word. I know. And we don't. We just want to be like heard and understood and responded to. And we're emotionally charged. And I get all that. But then men always say, well, all she does is nag, right? We talked about the nagging, but it's like, let's just get on the same page. I feel like that's just an easy one. And then, of course, for me, the biggest one for me is the sex and the intimacy. Yeah. So I have the 3 S's. I have the speak less, listen more, sex and intimacy. And then I have putting your kids second. That was my biggest one. I really do feel super strongly that this is so dumb, but it's kind of really obvious if you should get a divorce based on dangerous things, right? So clearly, if you're being, and those are sometimes the hardest marriages to get out of because it's so obvious, it almost smacks you in the face, but then how do you go forward? Right?
Exactly. And have you been manipulated to think you deserve it, or the fear that usually comes along with that? But what about that level that's before that? I mean, maybe it's not even as like sinister or even violent or abusive, but what about a situation like where there is that gray area where you don't know what you should do? Like, do you have any tips for somebody in that area?
I mean, it takes two people. So it's very simple for me to say this, but if you're going to go into this alone and you're planning on doing this work alone, it ain't going to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if he's not on board to meet you halfway to do this work, then because I guess that's what's behind my question is you can be the most well-intended, self-worky sort of wife that wants to make things better. And if he's not going to be on board with that and he doesn't value it, then you're spinning your wheels. And so those are the women maybe I'm speaking for here.
And I guess too, like, here's the other thing too, and this is I'm almost grateful for this. I'm going to say it first and then I'm going to explain myself. So if your husband or your wife comes home and they say, look, I don't love you anymore. You know what? Good. Because here's why. You don't want to be with someone who comes home one day and says, I don't love you anymore. Right. If that person walks in the door and says, I'm cheating on you, I don't love you anymore, I don't want to be here, then guess what? It's simple. That's a simple end to your marriage because no one deserves or needs to be in a relationship where you're not wanted or loved. So although I'm sorry for you and that's devastating and that's horrible and horrific, I'm also at the same time relieved and grateful and happy that that person let you go because there's someone out there for you that will give you the love you need and deserve.
Yeah.
So that's an easy fix. That's easy. That's, you know what?
But
Bye-bye.
most of them feel like they're not that. Most of them feel like there's some sort of hazy shade of, is that true? Does he love me? Do I love him? Can we make it work? Where you're like, you don't know. You can make it work. That gray area, that if you're asking those questions, you can make it work. It's a choice. Okay. So the very fact that you think that there is hope there.
Yes.
But both people have to have it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
If there's a glimmer of hope, if there's that glimmer of we can do this, you can do it. You can do it. You both need to do it. And if you have kids, you need to try. You need to. You owe it to your children. Like, it's almost so frustrating for me. Like, people will come in and they'll be like, you know, in that gray shady, and I'm like, look at them. I'm like, no. You need to do this. You need to do the work. You owe it to yourselves. You owe it to your kids. And then if you put in a year's work or you put in X amount of time and it's not working, then you go.
Okay. That right there is what totally relieved. I'm sitting here like, I hear what you're saying and I'm agreeing with part of it, but I'm partially feeling like all the people out there who were like, listen, we didn't make it work. But I think that's such the key is if you have to do that at least for some certain amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're going on for years and years and 4 years later, you're still not having sex and you still hate each other, bye-bye. But I mean, if you've both put in a concerted effort, but that's the key. Now look if one of you is having an online affair on Facebook with your ex-boyfriend from high school, that's not putting in the effort.
No, that's not.
You know what I'm saying? So don't give me the bullshit. Cause I've had that too. I've had clients walk in my place and they're like, you know, we've tried so hard. And then I find out later that the guy's been sleeping with the girl from high school. Give me a break. Be honest with yourself and true and authentic and give your partner the respect that she deserves.
Yes. And so in your book, the Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda book, do you talk about the realities of like the cost of divorce where the kind of the things we're talking about that people don't realize that, once you get divorced, like you think, I'll get to date and I'll have this freedom, but you don't realize you lose access to your kids part of the time, like these really painful things. Do you kind of detail those?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That book is hard. That book is a hard read.
So I want to point people towards that who are in that gray area, just kind of wondering what it's like the real deal of it. And I think that could be a sobering look at, okay, you know what? I think I can work on this versus I don't think I can work on this. I think that could give people some clarity.
Totally clarity, totally right there. It's also funny. There's some funny parts about like, dating and how you have to shave certain parts now and it's not the same as it was when you're married. And, that was very eye-opening for me. I was like, oh, wow, I actually have to
like care.
get naked again. Oh my God. Like this is like, there's a chapter on that. I mean, there are funny stuff. I mean, it's a good read.
So what does Mark say about you talking about him? Is he just fully supportive or what,
Yes.
what does he say?
You know what? It's funny. I think he's just so happy that I found my groove.
Oh my God. Well, he's amazing.
He is. I mean, I'm smiling so big. It's funny. He's good friends with my boyfriend. And people laugh all the time. They're like, he sits on one side of me and Jim, my boyfriend, sits on the other. Will be it out or something. And they're like, how is this possible? And I'm like, it just happened. Like we just made it work.
Wow.
It took work. It took 5 years for me to get here.
Did Mark basically say you can talk about whatever, or are there certain things that you know are boundaries that you can't cross or things you can't tell?
I definitely can't talk about where he works. I have some TV things that are kind of in the works and he can't be involved. He can't be on TV.
Okay.
I don't post his pictures, although you can find him. I think like he just laughs. I think people just really respect our relationship and the fact that he's just such a good person. I thank him for letting me do what I'm doing. And I think he just really is proud of me and is proud of where I've taken this because we were both in such a dark, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard,
I just love that his ability to like drop the ego about this and something that could be very triggering.
Yes.
Recently I did a post about for dads who think that my podcast is anti-men or anti-dad.
Oh.
And the reality is it's pro-mom. It's not anti-dad. It's pro-mom. And in order to be pro-mom, we're going to have to talk about some systems and relationships that are unsupportive to women. And since men rule the world, that's going to include men, even the woke ones.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have a background. I mean, I love men. I have a background where I have kind of worshipped them in a weird way. I kind of grew up in a way where the masculine version of things was something to idolize, and anything that was feminine or flaky or needy was like, we don't want anything to do with that. So most of my friends in high school and later were all guys. I lived with all guys in college.
That's weird. Me too.
Really?
That's so funny.
I've always felt like, well, guys don't have drama and they're funnier and you can be, you can say whatever around them. And so I've lived this way where I've put men on pedestals and I've protected them. And I mean, I was even years ago the kind of girl that would be like, well, she was wearing a short skirt. I mean, was she asking for it? Like, I've definitely been that girl.
Yeah.
And so once I became a mother, you can imagine my shock at having to own all the parts of myself, including and especially the feminine side, because
Right.
motherhood has so much of that I really had to come to terms with, like, what is this thing? So now I'm doing this podcast and my book and this work that's pro mom. And so to see guys get their egos dinged and then feel defensive about this. My husband and I were actually having this great conversation about it right before I'm doing this podcast today, but their reaction is about them. It's not about my stuff. And so I'm so grateful. My husband is, he was just like, man, the work you're doing is so important. And if any guys feel dinged by it or are defensive, that's their own shit. But here's the thing is like, Mark sounds like he's made from the same cloth. But I mean, I was naming to my husband today, I could name you a handful of guys that I think probably have this take on me that I'm anti-men or anti-dad or something, when it's like, it's so not the case. And actually them thinking that proves my point even more. That it's like, it's like, I bet you think this song is about you. It's not about you.
Yeah, it's not.
It's about supporting people who have felt unsupportive. So anyway, I just like want to give a huge shout out to your husband for being so supportive of you, because that's awesome.
He's great.
I mean, ex-husband. I just called him your husband.
Husband.
Yes.
I call my husband. It's so funny. I call my husband too sometimes, and I'm like, oh crap, whatever, husband. Yeah.
Sorry, Jim.
Jim is, it's funny. Jim's on my podcast too sometimes. He's a great guy. But it's funny. People think that he's a lot like my ex. And I'm like, I just went from one to the, it's just fine. They're all this. It's so funny. But I also think it's interesting too. Jim, my boyfriend, he has done some major work on himself since we started dating too, probably because of the work that I do. He's owned a lot of his, I don't want to say mistakes, but his part in his divorce, which I don't think that he even realized.
Thought about before.
Right. You really have to take ownership in your divorce before you can move forward in your new relationships. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Even forget divorce, any relationship. friendship. Like if you can't take ownership, how can you move forward and grow?
Right. And then you're wounded, like you're carrying this baggage.
Right. Right. And you were also saying how a lot of your girlfriends have these narcissistic ex-husbands. And that's a definite sign. If they can't take ownership of any part of that divorce, that is a real issue. If they really believe that it was her that was a cause, or that she was the root, or it was her fault, they're never going to be able to move on. They're always going to be angry and resentful and hurt,
Well, that's what one of my friends talks about. It's almost like his life isn't to move forward in his own life. It's just to make hers miserable.
Oh, it's awful.
And I've known her for a long time. And so we think about when she gets true freedom from that is when her kids turn 18.
Oh my God. That is so,
because she can't move out of state. So she can't even get away. So it's just.
That breaks my heart.
I know.
Breaks my heart.
And I mean, the sad thing is she's the same one who said the thing about, I really wished I had stayed to try to work it out because I traded one set of problems for another. But it's like, also maybe you shouldn't have stayed because this guy sounds like a grade A asshole.
Well, I'm glad she got out.
One of the things that I think is just fascinating about marriage is you find somebody when you're younger, if you're getting married younger, and you choose them to be your partner based on some really pointless shit. Like I think I chose my husband off of his love of Snoop Dogg, which we both share, and other rap music, his ability to make me laugh. And just he was a nice person. I always said, I don't care what I'm doing with him. We could be digging ditches or cleaning out sewer drains, but it would be a great time.
But I think that's good.
So you choose somebody though on these things. And then it always amazes me every year that we are together. It amazes me that, wow, our choices panned out because he's such a good dad and such a supportive, wonderful husband. And I mean, obviously, like we're all human, so we all have our flaws, but I think we take for granted, or at least those of us who are in marriages where we grow together, I think we take for granted the fact that is happening, because that doesn't always happen for people. So you may have picked somebody based on 20-year-old ideals who's an awful father who doesn't actually support your dreams after you become a mother, and you couldn't have known that.
Well, there's actually a scientific reason for that. How old were you when you got married?
I don't know.
Do you remember?
How would I know this? I got married in 2004. I hate math, so I'm not. Let's just say I was in my early 20s.
Okay,
let's say I was 25.
Okay,
I have no idea.
25.
Honestly.
So this is really funny. I don't know if you have time for this quick little piece of info,
of course.
this little nugget. But so now they're actually calling marriages that people that get married between 20 and 26, 27, they're called starter marriages.
Oh,
because statistics show that if you get married between 20 and 26, 27, that the divorce rate is actually higher. And you exactly just explained it, because what happens is that your amygdala, which is in frontal cortex, your brain, it's in charge of your emotions, right? So it's actually not developed. It's not developed till you're actually 25 years old. So when you say to things like what you just said, where you don't grow together, you actually don't, you're growing apart. When someone comes to me and they say, well, we just grew apart. You actually did.
right.
And it's funny. Literally you did, because your amygdala isn't grown yet. It isn't matured yet. So that person that you knew when you were 20 actually did change when they were 30. They weren't the same person that you knew. So you either technically grow together and you stay together, or you grow apart. So luckily, you and your husband were lucky enough to actually stay together and grow together.
But it amazes me, like, what are the odds? What are the odds that would happen, that what I thought was important at, my 20s actually panned out? Is like amazing.
You're right. So that's the point. That's what I'm saying. So like, I tell my kids all the time, you're not allowed to look at a girl till you're 35, because really, technically, the chances of them getting divorced are much greater if they get married before they're 27. So it is really, really crazy to me that we expect people to stay together for this long, and our lifespan is so much. So like the point that you just made is so spot on, because how can you be with someone and know exactly what kind of person they're going to be all these years?
Yeah. And parenting wise, like, you don't even put the parenting thing. There was nothing.
Yes.
I mean, I guess my intuition about he's a kind, nice person that makes me laugh, that then panned out later, because then guess what? He was that to my children. But you don't even know the questions to ask before you're in it. So when relationships don't work out, I mean, in a way, it's like, it's a shame, but it's also like, well, yeah, because I think it's rare when it actually really, truly does.
But here's the thing that I always think about. So I actually thought the same things about my ex-husband that you thought about your husband.
Uh-huh.
But my problem is that somewhere in my 30 to 40 range, I missed me. I lost me. So I was that woman who was like, I need more. I need fulfillment. I need to feel sexy. I'm not getting, and it was all about, instead of thinking to myself, I loved that guy who was nice and kind and a great dad. I got caught up in, I need more. I need to travel. I need to find the spotlight. So that's where I lost that. What I should have been thinking was, Jennifer, stay with this man. He is everything that he was because he was older than me. He's everything he was 5 years ago that you were looking for. You just got to check yourself. But I couldn't.
Yes. And that's the thing too about us moms, once we become mothers, having time to find what's important to us and what lights us up and not getting so sucked into the identity. So I don't know if you followed the work of Esther Perel. She wrote Mating in Captivity.
Of course.
I'm sure. Yes. And one of her lines that I absolutely love is she says something to the effect of, when wives cheat on their husbands, it's not because they want a change of partner. They want a change of identity. They want to get out of their role.
Yes.
And that is just so brilliant to me, because I think that that's like exactly what you're saying. That's what's at the core of that. It's not maybe I want a new guy. It's I don't want to be the wife, the caretaker, the mom.
Yeah, and I didn't. I was looking for everything everywhere else. Everywhere. I just everything to get out of my marriage in my head. It wasn't him. It was me. And I said that to him. I can't imagine how many times I said, this is not the life I want. I want bigger. I want better. And he was looking at me like, Jennifer, you've got everything you want right here. I'm giving you everything.
Wow.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Wow. I am so grateful for you coming and talking to us about this today. I know that this is going to be helpful to so many moms out there. So,
I hope so.
and it's been super eye-opening for me too, but I just thank you so much for giving your time here.
Thanks for having me. I loved this. Thank you, honey. Thank you.
Yeah. And so tell people where they can find you.
It's easy. It's jenniferhurwitz.com is my website. And then I'm Jennifer Hurwitz Biz everywhere else on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And my book is everywhere, and my podcast is Doing Divorce Right podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. This was amazing.
I loved it. Thank you for having me.
That was a lot, I know. And maybe some of your heads are spinning, but my hope is that this episode offered some clarity, whether that's clarity that you want to try harder to work things out, or maybe you know you need to leave, or you're grateful for what you've got in your marriage, or anywhere in between. Wherever you are, my hope is that you've at least learned something about yourself and your relationship here today, and can walk away with one small thing that you're going to do with your new knowing. Maybe it's a conversation, or a choice, or just a new feeling. And so I didn't plan this, but I recently went to breakfast with a woman whose story blew me away. And so, of course, I had to interview her so I could share it with you. And her story is coincidentally a bit of an opposite point of view from Jennifer's here today. So if you were listening to this episode going, but what about being happy and not settling? What about finding yourself? What about finding your one true love? Then make sure to listen to the next episode where you'll hear a courageous story of someone who felt all of those things and risked so much in exchange for her own happiness. And don't forget to pre-order my book, Adult Conversation, a Novel. It comes out May 5th, and if you like this podcast, you will likely love the book. It's a darkly comedic novel about the relentlessness of motherhood. And maybe Snoop Dogg is a side character. You'll have to read it to find out. You can find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and in stores May 5th. As always, thanks for listening.
Here I